Frozen cave. You need to listen to me. This is very important. Fellow Dvachinons, you need to know this. It's been 2 years since I came here. Yes, life is normal. There is enough fuel and ample ammunition. I'm afraid they won't be needed here. No, I did not kill anyone or do anything crazy and get arrested. You need to pay attention. Well, one day I went for a walk in the forest. Well, yes, in the evening as always. I observed the beautiful northern lights. I think that many seriously underestimate this wonderful region. How beautiful the night sky is, how light and how majestic. You know, I never wanted to return home, except for those moments where you need to buy something. It's a pity that I so rarely had any visits from family or my mother, but I feel good here. I don't need to worry. And so, having had enough of the beauty of the northern region, I decided to wander a little more in the frosty air. Yesterday, I worked a little more than necessary and decided that today I should have a little more rest. While walking, I suddenly see a hill that I had never seen before. Yes, I've been living in the north for a long time, but I did not notice it before because it seemed to be covered. And then I think, stop. There used to be more snow here. Why is there less of it now? And, as you understand, I decided to study it, up and down. Having dug up, out of curiosity, what if there is a hunting cache here, and an animal has dug it up, and that's why there is less snow here? I suddenly notice a small space near a hill. It's some kind of passage. Sensing something was wrong, I still returned home. I took with me an old gun, a 6th gauge. Yes, my favorite. I remember using it one time to shoot such a massive deer, such a big guy. I leave my hut and see that someone has filled up the tubercle again, carefully, as if a whirlwind had recently passed through here. Suddenly I felt very uncomfortable. Terrible thoughts came into my head. But, having driven away fear with thoughts of the northern lights, I decided to explore the previously unfamiliar space that was inside the mound. Having dug out a passage from under the snow, I went in there, hoping that there would be at least something good there. It turned out to be cold inside. The ground was frozen though. I don't know how you can dig such a deep and long tunnel in the icy soil, but it was spacious enough for some kind of animals there. Then the passage began to narrow, and in places I had to bend over. It was unpleasant, but then I saw a descent, an inclined surface, not slippery and not too inclined, so if you walk along it, you will not fall, into the deep expanses of this dungeon. It was still earthy. This is very strange. In my opinion, a stone should have started here a long time ago, I thought, looking around. The ceiling was stone, although everything around was covered with soil. This suggested artificial processing of the cave. Did someone specifically bring dirt here? But why? Gradually it began to warm up, but it was still cold. Now I began to notice passages extending from the main passage to the left and the right, most of which a person could go through. I looked into a couple of them, and they led to small, empty rooms covered in dirt. I finally convinced myself that there was nothing to be afraid of here, and that the dungeon was completely and utterly uninhabited. Therefore, I needed to explore it. A rather naive thought, of course, because I have quite a long time to go. And for some reason, I did not pay attention to the fact that the cave was so well ventilated. However, I definitely wanted to get to the end of the tunnel. And what could be there? No animals build such caves. Maybe our ancestors camped here, and in the end, there will be something useful for our history. Perhaps some military men dug this thing. It's possible even the government, for who knows what kind of project. The worst thing I can find here is sleeping bats, is what I thought to myself, and the tunnel continued on and on, with almost no end in sight. And suddenly I stopped. I thought I heard something. I listened as intently as I could manage. It sounded like someone was breathing in one of the rooms into which the passages led. I've never been so scared before, only later on, but I will continue. Deciding to take a look there, I tightened my grip on the handle of the gun and went inside. No skeleton jumped out there. I shone the flashlight, which I always take on evening walks, at the place where the breathing was coming from. There was a man lying there. He was wearing a green raincoat, black jeans, with an orange scarf around his neck. There is a bandage on his eyes. He lay there unconscious, and there was blood all around. On the walls, on the clothes. An ice pickaxe was lying near one of his hands. At this point I realized that I did not understand anything that was going on at all. Based on this, I decided to check my pulse to see if I was maybe dreaming or if something was happening to me. Suddenly, out of nowhere, this man twitches sharply and reflexively grabs an ice axe from the floor next to him. I have never been so scared. Even when I was playing Catch Me Brick, even when the neighbor's dog attacked me, I did not feel such horror. But my brain realized that nothing terrible had happened. The guy had simply freed himself from the shackles of sleep. Somewhere far away in my brain, a little frightened man was screaming, afraid that he was no longer a person, but a living dead man. And now there were black holes instead of eyes looking into my soul. But nothing like that happened, although there were more questions than answers. The man simply adjusted the bandage on his left eye. From under it, only a black thick liquid flowed out in small quantities, which is quite strange. He grabbed the ice axe, stood up, and went to the darkest corner of the room. I tried to ask the guy. He looked 21 years old in appearance, how he ended up here, and why he did not go upstairs. The answers did not satisfy me and even frightened me. I will no longer fall into the clutches. I will show them what I have instead of a left eye. And soon the pale faces will return. They rarely come into this room. Don't leave until they come inside. When you hear them, hide behind me. You have little chance against them. Deciding that I did not want to argue with a decent-looking guy who had forgotten something in the caves, I did not go back home, but decided to go forward. Of course, what I heard made me tense, but curiosity got the better of me. With the back of my head almost touching the ceiling of the cave, I moved on. Gradually, the passage began to widen, and I realized that I had entered a more spacious part of the dungeon. In the darkness, I found a passage to my left, turned in its direction, and turned on the flashlight. Lord, Mom, thankfully, there was no monster staring almost point blank at me inside there. Only dozens of living and dead people, completely naked, bald, with bloody stains all over their bodies, dumped in one heap. On some of them, I noticed huge wounds. One had a huge hole in his stomach, as if someone had chewed it out. All of the organs were simply devoured. I did not throw up, but suddenly I panicked. For some reason, I wanted to get them all out of here, but they lay silently, quietly breathing. Lying alive on the dead and the dead on the living, I remembered an excerpt from some poem. My mind became clouded, and I ran out of this room filled with bodies. By mistake, my feet led me into another room, and not into the passage leading back from the dungeon. In this section of the Devil's Lair, there was warm earth, on which, as I guessed, the creatures that dragged those people into their underground tunnel must lie. In one of the corners, there was a stone table, completely unliftable. On it, there was one candle and a golden candelabra, recently extinguished, and next to it was a stack of books. There was another passage behind the table, and I, not remembering myself, went there. There I discovered another room, which it seemed to me belonged to someone very important. There was a bed there, a real one, modern, well decorated, and probably very cozy. Having calmed down a little, apparently having forgotten the recent events for a while, I decided to shine a flashlight on the wall. On one of them hung a strange portrait that clearly did not belong to a person. A terrible creature looked at me from the portrait, smiling. Only his neck and face were visible, but that was enough for me. The whole body, as I understood it, had a pale grey skin color, but the muzzle was white as the moon. Smiling mercilessly with a row of small, frequent teeth, it looked into my eyes. Round, wide-open black eyes, slightly shiny. On the frame, there is an inscription in English, Chorus. I don't know what this means, but it sounds menacing, and it seems to me that this is the name of the one depicted in the picture. Looking at the portrait, I noticed something wrong in it, and then I realized, this is not a picture. This is a photograph, a huge photo. What kind of creatures are these that can use modern technology? And what is that lying on the bed? It was a phone. Suddenly I realized just how smart these creatures are. They created their own civilization under here, and it is unknown how many of them there are on our planet. They have been hiding from people for a very long time, although their passages and caves are everywhere, and it is unknown how many of the people who saw them remained alive. And then I rushed back home with the speed of a flying arrow, clutching in my hand one of the books that I found on the stone table. Having soon crossed the earthen corridor, I crashed into something living. Everything that had ever happened before in my life flashed before my eyes in an instant, every single memory. But it turned out not to be a terrible monster, but the same person I met. Without making a sound, he grabbed me by the neck like a little kitten and dragged me into one of the rooms. He told me to stay there and that the pale-faced creatures would be back soon. He told me that he would help me get back outside, but that I would have to follow every single word that he said. I was almost crying with fear. I asked him what kind of creatures these things were. I asked what and who and where they came from. He only told me that they were evil, and that's all he could say. He told me to be silent and was very snappy with me. He was adamant that I could not look into his eyes or at his face when he came back. He did not tell me why. And after a measly 5 seconds, footsteps were heard. No, not just steps, a variety of sounds. Laughter, the rustling of the earth, cheerful cries, barking. Somewhere, I even heard human speech. It was calm, quiet and measured. No, it was not human. I decided to take a couple of moments to look at what was going on in the corridor. And I saw there, I think, hundreds of creatures, pale-faced and red-faced skinny creatures, similar to the one whose portrait I saw in the room with a bed. Humpbacked, pale giants with blunt muzzles, shaggy dwarves with wooden curved clubs, skinny creatures covered with frost, and one of the monsters had in her hands something that made me realize just how dangerous an environment I was living in. In his hands was a small blanket. It looked like the blanket a child or a newborn baby would have. He soon threw it over his back and shoulders and smiled. It was such a familiar smile. It was him. It was the same one from the picture. Letting out a chuckle, he closed his eyes in pleasure and said, "It's so warm in his house." Hearing this, I hid back. It seemed to me that I was noticed. After a noticeable period of time, the noise began to subside, and the guy with the ice axe and bandage shouted, "Get out," and jumped out. I followed suit, falling awkwardly to the ground. Nearby lay a black bandage that had already been removed from his eye, and the man stood with his back to me and separated me from the terrible creatures. The thought occurred to me now that he would be torn apart. All those creatures would attack at once, and now my first and last defender would be destroyed. I don't know, because I was too scared to look or watch. All I heard was all of the creatures suddenly falling silent, but then after a while, they began to scream in wild frenzy along with laughter. But I remembered the advice and ran to where I needed to go, back upstairs to where the snow and my warm, comfortable home are. My home is my fortress. Yes, if only it were that easy. Having got out of the damn dungeon, I shoveled away the cold snow with trembling hands. But this time, I dug a way out, not in. I swear that when I was running upstairs, someone called my name, both from the cave and somewhere from the forest. I've never run so fast in my life. Instantly opening the door, I run into the house and grab cartridges, my favorite 6 buckshot, and I understand that in a panic, I left the double-barreled shotgun in the cave. I don't know why at such a crucial moment. Maybe because of the habit of holding a weapon in one hand until it is needed. And just then, someone started walking around my house. A familiar click. I'm sure it's the same Horus or Chorus, or whatever the English word was. It was he who walked around my house with my gun, not for the first time. And contrary to my expectations, no one knocked on the door. No one climbed into the shuttered windows or howled. Only for a while, someone carefully, almost silently, walked through the snow. Then these steps died down, and I sat in a daze. Then I heard someone coming, and at the same time, a conversation. 2 people were walking towards my house, discussing how long they would have to spend the night with me. At first I was happy. Finally people, salvation. but for some reason, the conversations continued, but they never went anywhere. I listened and realized that there was only one person on the street. I instantly realized that one of the cannibals was there. They want to lure me out, and this someone who spoke is a very smart hunter, capable of speaking with two voices at once. But he was waiting for me to relax, which means that as long as I know that death is close, then I have a chance. Grabbing my single-barreled shotgun, I decided that I had to act now. I decisively ran out into the street, was about to grab the forend with a scream and shoot 2 cartridges directly into the belly of this monster, when suddenly, darkness. I see nothing but snow, my hands and trees, and as if in response to this, suddenly there was just hellish laughter. It was as if wild joy had gripped the entire forest. They were even laughing somewhere in the treetops, on the roof, 3 meters away from me. And so I ran away from my house, where the fire in the stove was still burning. There were stocks of ammunition, warm clothes. That's why I'm typing this on my phone right now and not posting from my home computer. I had to, because I left it all behind. I tried to call friends, but all attempts were in vain. Now I'm homeless in the city. Yes, I got there in one night, but in general, everything is fine. I found a person online who also knows about pale-faced people, but he's in another city, and I don't have much money right now. I hope they will help me, and I would really like to believe that the cannibals will not meet me at the highway. Hopefully I do not ever see them again. I hope it's just that village that I live in, and that they aren't under anywhere else in Russia. Those tunnels were big, but I don't know how far they stretch. Don't really know where else to post this, so here. Be me 17, going to stay with my uncle who owns a ranch in Idaho for the winter. Parents are older and had to be in their late 40s, so my uncle, Dad's big brother, is close to 60 and more like a grandpa than anything. He's been married and divorced twice and has been living alone for almost my whole life. I live in Mesa, Arizona, so the drive was fucking grueling. My uncle picked me up in October last year. He is super tall and a big ass dude with a massive beard. He's pretty chill, but really rough looking. His ranch is in the middle of nowhere, with no neighbors for miles. When I got there, it was kind of exactly what I thought it would be like. Super old school, run down looking. Driving in, I noticed he had a long line of rocks lining the end of his property that were all painted white. I asked him about them, and he told me that he would tell me in a minute. As soon as we got in the house, he told me there were rules when staying with them, and if I broke them, he would have no problem driving me all the way home. Said I couldn't go out at any time after sundown without him under any circumstances. At night, I needed to have my curtains drawn and all of the lights off, and that if I needed a light, I had to use a candle that he kept next to the bed. Then he took me outside and pointed out to the white rocks. He said that the rocks went around the entire property and had been there even before he lived there. Told me to never ever go over the rocks or go anywhere far from the house without him. I was kinda spooked and asked why, but all he said was that there were always coyotes and that they would kill me. First night was fine, except for the shitty bed. Next day he asked if I wanted to have fun and took me out back to shoot. Few weeks go by fine, just hanging out having bonfires, shooting, and helping him on the property. End up getting into pretty decent shape, helping him out. Then in the middle of November, we woke up to find a dead deer in the yard. My uncle flips his shit, grabs me and puts me in the house and starts to lock the door and windows up, tells me to grab my shit and keep it near the door. I ask him what the fuck is up. He doesn't tell me. Has me sleep in the living room on the pull-out couch while he sleeps in his chair. Next few days, it's like he's a different person. Super paranoid and on edge. End up sleeping in the living room for a week till he chills and all is calm again. Thanksgiving comes around and he cooks up a turkey he had frozen and a bunch of other shit. We stuff ourselves and he even lets me have a few beers. We're chilling by the fire, talking about the time he got into a fight with a guy over his ex-wife while listening to his old records, when a shit ton of loud noises come out of nowhere. We both shoot up. He runs for the door. I follow after him and end up running full speed into the back of him and falling over. He had stopped at the door and started locking the locks. I thought he was running outside, so I ran full speed. He tells me to grab a shotgun. I'm freaked out by this point because my massive badass of an uncle is freaking out. Loud ass sounds outside like barking, yelling, and someone hitting a metal trash can all mixed together. Then the window breaks. A massive rock was thrown through it. It was one of the painted white rocks. I'm freaking out now. My uncle shoots out the window. My ears are ringing, and I am crying at this point. He yells to grab the table and put it against the window. I put it against the window while he runs to his room. He comes back out with his rifle and hands it to me. Tells me if I see anything to not hesitate and shoot it. I ask him if we should call the cops, but he tells me they won't be able to get to us for a few hours. All night we sit in the living room, listening to whatever this thing is, destroy the porch and pound on the door. As soon as the sun starts to come up, my uncle goes to the door and starts to unlock it. I start to freak out like, what the fuck are you doing? They are still there. He rips the door open and there is nothing there. I'm absolutely shitting my pants, thinking of all the stories I've read about monsters, skinwalkers, and other shit. The door is absolutely fucked. Super scratched up chunks missing. The porch has pieces missing, and his truck has all the windows smashed and tires shredded. Looks like a bomb went off. My uncle looks around and sighs. I ask him what the fuck was that. He looks at me and tells me that there is a gang that comes around and does this kind of stuff to people's houses. A gang? Why are you lying to me? He tells me to shut the fuck up and relax. I don't believe him, and I can see he's kicking himself for telling such a shitty lie. I go to take a picture of the door and outside, and he grabs my phone and says no. I say what the fuck, and he tells me if my mother saw what happened, she would rip his balls off. He tells me to relax, and it is okay. We clean up the porch, and he has me help him replace his tires with a few old ones from the shed. We limp the truck back to town for him to get replacement tires and ask about the windows. Everyone in town is staring hard at us like we just drove into town in a clown car. It's a small town with a cafe/diner, a gas station and mechanic, a general store, and a motel. Everyone knows each other for the most part. The gas station clerk comes out and starts to talk to my uncle. The clerk and my uncle are talking quietly, and I can see the clerk is upset. I overhear him say, "Well, what did you expect? It's getting worse, man." Okay, what the fuck? He takes me back to the house and tells me that the gang he was talking about was real, but they are more like vandals and tweakers. Still don't believe him, but act like I do. That night my uncle was surprisingly calm and told me that they wouldn't come back 2 nights in a row. The night was calm, except for this weird electric feeling in the air, like the whole place would blow up if the littlest thing happened. I woke up really late to my uncle snoring in his chair. I had to piss super bad. The fire had died out, so I used my phone light to make my way to the bathroom. The bathroom is super small, with a tiny window at the top of the back wall behind the toilet. I get to the bathroom and turn the light on to piss. While I'm pissing, I start hearing this weird noise, like the tiniest scratching sound. I quickly realize it's coming from the window. Then it turns into tapping. I'm so terrified, I'm just frozen there. If I wasn't already pissing, I would be pissing my pants. Then I realize that I fucked up. I turn the light on when I'm supposed to be using a candle. I'm shaking. Then the window breaks and glass hits me. Screaming, I back out of the bathroom, pissing all over my legs and pants. I didn't even look at the window, I just ran down the hall, trying to pull my pants up. My uncle runs around the corner and grabs me. He yells what happened, while I try to yell what happened. He sees the light on and runs to shut it off. He yells, "I thought I made it clear about lights at night." I'm crying, digging through my duffel bag, looking for new pants. The next day we leave, and he drives me home, saying it would be safer at home. Told not to ever tell my parents, because they would freak out. He stayed at the house with us for a few days, and eventually, we both chilled out again. I turned 18 this February, and recently bought my first handgun, and want to eventually go back, and see if he will let me take pictures, or set up a camera. I don't know what to think, since he won't tell me anything about what happened. It's not like the stories, where you hear talking or whispering. It was just violent, whatever it was. Does anyone know anything this could have been? A while ago, at McCord AFB, there was a C-17 that was hard broke for maintenance. Pretty much an entire aircraft was grounded for having hydraulic issues, electrical problems. The whole thing was a huge basket case and would sit untouched for days at a time. Maintainers either waiting for new parts or not having the manpower necessary to fix one small thing on a jet with much more than one problem. After all, why work on a busted aircraft when work was needed on one that was flying tomorrow? Up on the tail on Pick related, there was an airman who was doing some work up there by himself. Perhaps he was inspecting an actuator or repairing some wiring. I'm not too sure, but while he was up there, a ground crew turned the aircraft hydraulic system on to run a test. Completely unknown to them, someone was working on the tail near a movable surface. Now, for those of you who aren't aircraft savvy, turning on the flight controls will bring all the flaps to a neutral position, and because the ground crew did not check, an airman ended up getting mangled by an actuator all the way up there on the top of the tail. Nobody knew or heard, not while wearing ear protection with an aircraft running. Nobody would have thought anything of it when they saw red trailing down the tail. We'd all assume it was hydraulic fluid, which can look pretty bloody. His body was up there for almost a week before somebody noticed a foul smell while doing an inspection in the cargo bay. After several hours, they guessed that the odor was coming from the tail. So after bringing out a ladder, they found a rotting corpse, head and arm violently smashed between an elevator. EMTs were called out. More investigations, more inspections. People were looking for this guy. Everyone had thought he went AWOL, contrary to what really happened. After a couple more months, the investigation ruled out the cause of death. More rules were implemented to make sure something like this never happens again. Thing is though, pilots and maintainers would hate being near this aircraft. Pilots are already superstitious enough as it is, but if you were inside it by yourself, you'd swear on whatever god you believe in that someone was watching you. It only got worse when the aircraft was powered on. People communicating to each other via headsets would pick up voices, mutters, and breathing. Pilots eventually started reporting intermittent calm while flying. Obviously, nobody wanted to say it was because of ghosts, but when it poses a problem when a pilot is trying to communicate with the control tower for a landing, they try to fix it. So avionics shot every wire related to calm on the aircraft. Anything broken was replaced, chafing, minor damage, more shielding to keep this intermittent signal from popping up. None of it fixed it, and people refused to go near the C-17 by themselves. And an added note, pilots are extremely superstitious. There was a crew chief who gave a pilot the whole Father, Son, Holy Spirit number on their chest, and this captain stopped, taxied back to the spot, and shut down the jet. Pilot refused to fly the rest of the day. That one's not really spooky, just funny to us. Volunteer at the local aquarium. Fun summer job for a high schooler. Get to play with fish and talk about whales all day. Sometimes the place does night events like weddings, company parties, Halloween, etc. Has to stay late for a night event. Event is pretty fun. Hung with my bros and this chick I liked at the time named Jamie. It's now pretty late and people are leaving. Offer a hand to clean up. Turns out some of the tables need to go upstairs, on the second story, where the theater is. Theater is cool during day, but spooky in the dark. Imagine a big concrete amphitheater, with a huge pool in the center, and that's about it. Sea lions swimming in the pool, making animal noises, no bother. Though a bit creepy, because I'm all alone in the massive space. Get into storage room, and drop-off table or two. Back of our storage room is connected to the quarantine area for sick or new small animals. Poke back there because I've been there before, but never really explored. Tanks with really cool critters, all marked. In the center is a small pool, unmarked. Pool is covered with a net, but I can see vague shapes moving inside. Lights are on, so I can tell they're fish of some kind, probably for a new exhibit. Head out of storage and lock up. Downstairs on the main floor, there's an eerie quiet, almost serene calm. Soak it in and leave for the night with my buddies. We take the back path around the outdoor exhibits. You can hear the whales swimming, and a lot of the animals are rustling around, kind of cool. Head out back entrance by our massive food locker, basically a giant storage container freezer that houses all the fish to feed the animals. Somebody points out a light that is on in the locker. He steps in to shut it off and finds the door unlocked, maybe just a careless coworker. He shouts to get us inside, sounds panicked. Some of the bags of frozen fish were knocked over and spilled all over, not that weird. When we get to the mess though, we see that the bag looked like it was literally torn open. Frozen fish and squid guts everywhere. What the fuck? We joke with each other about whether we should clean it up or just leave it. Jamie says we should be responsible and goes to grab a mop from the kitchen. Now, the kitchen in an aquarium isn't like a typical restaurant kitchen. Imagine a huge, tile room with one giant drain in the floor and big steel countertops that all flow into one huge sink. Cabinets are stocked with knives, vitamins, and clipboards with dietary plans. There's a fridge, of course, for meds and produce, and there's 1 or 2 massive spray hoses for cleaning up guts or anything else. There's also a large glass sliding door that leads out into large animal quarantine bay, probably so staff could watch animals, or even have them come into the kitchen if needed. Anyway, we get into the kitchen, and it is a mess. The hoses are hanging loose, there's puddles to step through, knives out of their holders, and somebody left fish guts on the counter and floor. Jamie gives us tasks to clean this place, and then get the fuck out. Mind you, it's also freezing in here, which I should have mentioned earlier, still attached to the freezer, and it's late February at this point, so there's snow outside, and it is damn cold. As I'm cleaning, I can see my breath. Somebody tries to lighten the mood, and points out the sliding door is fogged up from all of us warming up the room. I go over to wipe it off, so we can see outside. It's not our side of the glass. Unlock the door, and open it to peek outside, and see more guts outside the door. We are officially getting worried now. Somebody finally says, "Screw this, it's not our job to clean up," suggests we head out. We pack up, and start heading back the way we came, when Jamie says she wants to check on the dolphin we have in quarantine. Somebody pipes up that they're not going outside that way and leaves. Rest of us go to check out the dolphin. It's still there, half asleep, but swimming around. Step over the trail of fish guts that's literally covering the pathways around this tank, shaking our heads, and walk to our cars. Some of us are leaving a trail of blood in the fresh snow, and after a few curses, we stomp our shoes and get in. As my friend and I pull out in my car, my headlights hit the freezer area. There in the headlights is a human-shaped figure, just standing near the door of the freezer. Beep the horn, and the shadow does not move. Beep again, and it starts shuddering. Best way to describe it. One more beep, and the mystery figure lumbers off toward the tree line behind the parking lot. My friend rolls down the window and starts shouting, but we don't get a response. Oh well, and we drive home, joking about the night to ease the unsettling fish guts bit, and both of us agree to report the weirdo. The next day I come into work and see one of my co-workers in hysterics. Ask what's happening, and find out that the dolphin in the quarantine didn't make it, and was found belly up with a huge gash in its side. Vets think it might have struck something or swam up against a rough edge in its pool, which is kind of weird, but alright. Mention the weird person and the mess in the kitchen to my boss, and they said somebody took care of it. I was then scolded for not using the main exit last night and told me not to go in the freezer again without being asked. They also would let security know to increase their vigilance around the area. Okay, whatever, but what was with the mess? They are clueless and send me on my way. Later that day, I go into the small animal quarantine again for a job and see the netted pool is literally exploded into a bloody foam. What the fuck? Somebody jammed a tool into the filter, causing the water to become hyper-oxygenated and killing the fish by blowing them to bits with gas. Boss freaks out and has people on it right away to clean up the mess. Strike up a conversation with Jamie about the two incidents on the same day, and she agrees we should look out for each other. During the aquarium-wide department meeting, we hear some words about the dolphin, the fish tank, and a news story that one of the parrots was also killed. It was removed from its cage, and its body was found near the outdoor quarantine, wings removed, and one of its eyes gouged. This is getting too creepy for me. Somebody raises their hand and asks if these are related. Head of Animal Care quickly denounces this and says that logically, it's just three weird coincidences. Everyone needs to up their game. Animals are precious, etc., etc. Jamie and I know there is something weird and decide to figure it out on our own by sneaking around the aquarium whenever we can. Business continues as usual. Next day, one of the sea lions is found dead in its exhibit, apparently poisoned. The amphitheater is heavily monitored with security and cameras, and the only way non-trainers can access the animals is by literally entering the water or opening a small gate on the side of the show floor used for guests to meet the sea lions. There were also a few penguins found wandering outside of their exhibit. At least a few have had their ID tags removed, and one with a broken leg and a wing that definitely seemed like fight injuries. Mind you, the penguin exhibit has an opening about 10 feet off the ground, and is surrounded by concrete ramps and trees, making it very hard to get to or from, one of the aquarium's bigger design flaws. Aquarium still denies any strangeness, and that these are all coincidences, pleads with us to get our shit together and take better care of the animals. Later that week, I was sent to the storage freezer to snag food for some of the animals. Take the back path again, because I'm still snooping. While in the freezer, the door slams shut on me. I panic, because even if I can get out, I didn't turn on the lights, stupid, because I thought it was a quick job. Stumbling through the freezer to find the exit, pre-smartphones with lights, before you guys say anything. Step in something, look down, and can just tell I'm standing in fish guts, clear as crystal by the smell, and knowing that was the only option, realize what might be happening. Tiptoe toward where I think the exit is, find a door and fling it open. It's the kitchen. Nobody here because it's not feeding time. Shut door behind me and walk out like nothing happened. Walking back with my frozen fish when I decide to cut back to the main building through the back path, through the woods behind the aquarium, and behind all the outdoor exhibits. Leaving a trail of fish guts with me, and kick off my shoes on a tray, fed up with this business. See a red patch in the snow, just off the trail. Poke it with a branch, and discover it's a mound of frozen fish and guts, covered up with a blue tarp under some leaves and snow. Shit fucking Christ. Notice tracks from the pile to the nearby highway, and another set going toward the aquarium. They are boot prints, huge and heavy duty. Walk off that trail as fast as I fucking can and report it to the aquarium higher ups. They state they'll investigate. Never heard anything further about it, but there were a few more strange deaths before the end of the season. One of the ducks from the duck pond was found with a sharpened stick jammed through its chest, still alive but barely. A shark died, and during the necropsy, we found metal nuts, bullets, and birdshot in its stomach and intestines, ripping a hole in the lining which killed it. It was raised in captivity its whole life. Weird deaths finally stopped toward the end of the season, and I finished my volunteering without issue. A lot of the season's interns left along with me, including Jamie. Some of them went back to school, some got new jobs at other aquariums or zoos. A few months after all this happened, I heard from a friend still at the aquarium that a nearby nature center was reporting strange deaths and similar experiences. My face went. There is a person out there who is getting their kicks going into or working at animal parks and murdering the animals.